You're listening to The Foundation of Wellness, a refreshing take on diet and lifestyle, with Jessica Dogert, a registered dietitian nutritionist, and Marisa Moon, a primal health coach.
Hey you guys, my name's Jessica and I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, and you can learn all about me on my website at jessicadogert.com.
Hey, what's up? This is Marisa Moon. I'm a certified primal health coach, and you can learn more about me at marisamoon.com and mylongevitykitchen.com. You guys, this is episode 31, and it's all about nutrient density. How many nutrients are in the food you're eating? What's changed in the last 100 years, and what does that mean for our health and our happiness?
You know what, Marisa? It's actually been reported that nearly 80% of the food found in grocery stores today didn't even exist 100 years ago. And our food supply, it has changed drastically, no doubt. I mean, no one can argue that we have messed with Mother Nature, and she's not happy about it. I feel like now we genetically modify plants, literally changing the genetic makeup of these organisms. And we change how we farm with the use of pesticides. And we change how we raise animals by changing their living conditions, pumping them with antibiotics and hormones, and just feeding them unnatural diets. Plants don't need chemicals to grow, and cows were meant to actually eat grass and not corn. Chickens were healthy and happy on the range, and fish was actually caught wild in the sea. You know what? Only a century ago, virtually all fruits and vegetables were organic, and all beef was grass-fed, and all chickens were free of antibiotics, and all fish were wild-caught. But now these foods are really difficult to access, and depending on where you live, I mean, let's think back to our great-grandparents' lives. They ate real food, you guys, and that's all that was available to them, and things were great. But now, much of what we define as food would never have been considered as such a century ago. You know, when deciding what is real food and what is fake food, I want you guys to ask yourself if your great-grandmother would recognize it if you put it on her plate. You know, would she know what a Twinkie was, or Flaming Hot Cheetos, or McNuggets? So let's go back to the original definition of food. It's a source of naturally occurring nourishment. Not just anything that's technically edible and referred to as safe, like stuff food companies encourage us to consume in large amounts. You know, just because a food is edible does not mean it should be eaten. If it's a new product within the last century that's been manipulated in a factory or goes against nature, then it's not real food, no matter what any commercial or advertisement tells you. I mean, real food is food that's been around for more than 100 years. Even better if it's been around for thousands of years.
Totally. 100 years is almost nothing when we think about our history and our American food system. And I have so much to say about it all. I just love this opener, Jess. You really put it all together for us in a great way to kick things off. I want to elaborate on our diet today and what the consequences are. But I first want to explain what the overarching theme is for today's episode: nutrient density. Listeners, have you ever heard of nutrient density? This term refers to how many vitamins and minerals and all different types of nutrients are present per calorie in a certain food. So nutrient-dense foods give you lots of vitamins and minerals in relation to how many calories that food contains. And nutrient-poor foods supply lots of energy, or calories, without the vitamins and the minerals. And keep in mind today, we're not talking about macronutrients. Macros, for short, are what everyone talks about when it comes to your weight and your diet and your health. Macronutrients only include the carbohydrates, the proteins, the fats in your food. But micronutrients, on the other hand, micronutrients include the vitamins, minerals, and other compounds required in these small amounts for all basic metabolic functions. That's all the functions in our body that occur every nanosecond of our life. Okay, now you're getting it. That's why the nutrient density of foods refers primarily to micronutrients and amino acids, the building blocks of protein. Your body needs about 40 different micronutrients for proper physiological function. There are plenty of consequences when we have insufficient micronutrient intake, and a lot of which you're living with right now, and many of which we're going to talk about today. Unfortunately, nutrient deficiency is widespread in people following an industrialized modern diet like we do in America. Because, well, like the picture that Jessica was painting for us, those foods are way too far from the real thing, and they're simply nutrient poor.
Right, and alongside a change in our food supply, we are obviously seeing the consequences in our health of our nation in the last century. A study done in 2005 suggested that the current generation of children, for the first time ever, is predicted to have a shorter life expectancy than the previous generation. And whether or not that proves to be true, we do know that there is a rise in chronic diseases, as well as autoimmune conditions and infertility and allergies and dental issues and even food sensitivities. So while these new conditions may not shorten our lives thanks to modern medicine, they certainly decrease the quality of our lives. Have you ever talked to a couple struggling to get pregnant or a mother of a son with severe food allergies? These new modern diseases should really make you think maybe it's the food.
Yes. I mean, more than half of Americans are deficient in zinc, calcium, magnesium, vitamin A, vitamin B6, and vitamin E, according to a 1997 survey, and that was a long time ago. Approximately 1/3 of us are also deficient in riboflavin, thiamine, more B vitamins, folate, vitamin C, and iron. In many cases, these aren't mild nutrient deficiencies either. Up to 50% of Americans consume less than half of the recommended daily allowance for several micronutrients that we need. You know, that recommended daily allowance is the RDA, or that thing you see on the back of a package next to the vitamin content. You know, this is alarming that 50% of Americans are less than half of the recommended amount of nutrients when you consider the fact that the RDA is recommended by the government, but based on the amount we need to prevent certain diseases from the days of World War II. You know, there are a couple problems here. New health concerns and diseases have developed since then, and our food system has changed dramatically since World War II, and the numbers aren't even enough to keep us healthy. That's not the point. They're just the recommended amount that will keep you alive, keep you from dying. This means that an even larger percentage of Americans are deficient in these vitamins and minerals. And really, the long-term consequences are chronic disease, like you were saying. These are things we see everywhere today, and they're really hurting us and our families, like cancer and even developmental concerns regarding everything from prenatal development and problems with our eyesight, our teeth alignment, and of course, all those issues with infertility.
You know, it is hard to be healthy, you guys. Think about food ads on TV, on billboards, or in magazines. You know, it's estimated that 90% of food advertisements are for processed foods or alcohol. These big food companies have a big interest in marketing their foods in such a way that they should be put on every plate in America. So that means more profit for them and less nutritious food for us. And on top of that, high quality, clean food, it's sometimes impossible to access, plus it's often very expensive. But on a positive note, you do have 3 opportunities each day to change our food situation. That's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So think about it this way. As consumers, we choose which companies that we want to stay in business. So if everyone stopped buying Kraft macaroni and cheese, they would be forced to adapt to our demands so they can sell more again, right?
Yeah, you see that already with companies like Kraft. They're surrendering to food activists and busy moms who start demanding food without chemical additives and without the toxic ingredients that we can't even pronounce.
Yes, and while it might not seem like you're making a huge impact, if it's a group effort, then change will happen, especially if you're dedicated to these new higher standards when you hit the stores. We've seen the gluten-free industry double in the last 5 years with no signs of slowing down. Why? Because consumers want it. And if consumers want it, food companies that sell it will just be successful. Amazon acquired Whole Foods Market. Why? Because that's the future. It's time to wake up and eat real food. Okay, so where do you start? You want to start by focusing on the ingredients in your food. I challenge you listeners to just go to the grocery store and pick up a box of your favorite cereal or even a can of soup. And look, what is the food made of? If you can't recognize the ingredients, put it back. If there are more than 5 ingredients, it's probably too processed. Put it back. And how much time are you spending inside those aisles buying food in a package instead of buying food in its whole form? How much time are you spending in the produce section? How much of your food is actually fresh?
I am like 100% on board with what you're saying right now, Jess. And I remember the days that I looked at the ingredient list and I thought, well, if it's in there, it must be fine. They wouldn't put it in there if it wasn't. Or how much of it am I really having? I'm sure it doesn't make a difference in this amount. But I know in my heart and in my nutrition-obsessed brain now that we have to start with real food. The more you learn about it, the more it all just makes sense. But maybe, just maybe, as a listener right now, you are not really convinced yet. You're not really understanding how big of a deal this actually is. Why should you really care, like starting right now? Well, there's an almost immediate reward for optimizing your micronutrient intake and eating more nutrient-dense foods. A nourishing, balanced diet is the key, wait for it, to eliminating hunger and minimizing your appetite.
Yes.
I know for me, this was like everything. This was the ultimate game changer for me. This is what always gave me the courage to reduce my sugar intake, watch my carb intake, even though just like everyone else, I was obsessed with bread and pizza and energy drinks and stupid things like Hot Pockets and McNuggets. I was addicted too, but I just wanted to be free from the grips of my never-ending appetite. And I felt the almost immediate reward when I wisened up about my nutrient intake. You can finally just get a hold of your cravings, your appetite, and forget about willpower. That's the best. The brain's appetite system makes us hungry when it senses that we need more nutrients. Appetite stops, or you have control over it when the deficiencies have been relieved and your body is satisfied. So let's think about the consequences of never satisfying your body's needs for nutrients. Well, the consequences other than being constrained by the grips of your appetite. Well, one of the most obvious consequences is that you gain weight because you'll keep eating to satisfy your hunger. Your brain's telling you you're hungry. You'll never be satisfied. And your body will just keep storing away all of the extra calories as fat. And you'll eventually become obese.
Let's think about what you just explained here. So if you don't eat a nourishing diet, you'll gain weight and likely become obese because your appetite is tricking you into eating more and more, and you're never really satisfied. And what you're eating isn't good for you, so you just keep craving more of the junk and packing away the pounds. We all know what it feels like to keep eating from the breadbasket even though our stomach is physically full, am I right?
Oh, do I know that feeling? All too well. And this theory works in reverse. If we look at the nutrient status of obese people, we see that they're typically low in so many nutrients like vitamin D. They're alarmingly low in magnesium, deficient in iron and zinc and copper and selenium. And if nutrient deficiencies drive our appetite and consuming unnecessary calories drives weight gain, then the recipe for the perfect weight loss diet is going to be the recipe that gets us perfect nutrient status and consistently satisfies our hunger.
Now, you might be thinking, why don't I just take a multivitamin? A multivitamin can prevent nutrient deficiencies, right? But Real life examples and scientific studies show us that supplemental nutrients do not have the same effect on the body as the nutrients we get from food. I love that.
Yeah, this makes so much sense, really, when you think about how nearly every supplement is made up of synthetic vitamins that are manufactured to imitate the real thing. And historically, humans have always accessed their nutrients from whole foods, not supplements. I mean, there are plenty of less developed countries and populations today that still have robust health and never have taken a supplement in their life.
And nutrients are not that simple to imitate or manufacture because the science is really so limited on the complexity of these substances. Most nutrients require specific enzymes and other factors to be properly absorbed. And vitamins typically isolate nutrients and ignore the complexity. And that's why you might benefit from eating a calcium-rich diet, but can risk an increase in heart disease if you supplement your calcium instead.
Oh, that's such a great example, Jessica. And I love the way it's summarized by the genius scientist and author of The Perfect Health Diet named Paul Jaminet, when he says, while supplements can and should be used for therapeutic effect in specific health conditions, or used to replace certain nutrients that are difficult to obtain from food, they should never be used to replace nutrients that can be found in a nutrient-dense diet.
Yes, there you have it. Well, circling back to the conversation about appetite, what I find really fascinating is that real food has a positive hormonal response. And hormones aren't just sex hormones or stress hormones. There are also appetite hormones and so much more. So let's understand the science behind this hormonal response to real food. First, there's insulin, which is a storage hormone that helps get sugar from our blood into our cells. So processed snacks and refined sugars and cereals and bars are quickly absorbed by your system and shoot up your blood sugar levels. So when blood sugar goes up, insulin is released. Again, insulin is a pro-storage hormone. It promotes storage of the sugar into the cells, and if you have too much of it, it gets stored as fat. And it also blocks fat from being burned. So essentially, you are locking fat in your cells while insulin is high. So following the spike in blood sugar, there is a dramatic fall in blood sugar. And this leads to false feelings of hunger shortly after. So the rise and fall of blood sugar throughout the day will create feelings of hunger as well as swings in both mood and energy. So insulin receptors will really start to just become less sensitive to the sugar, and your body will think that you need more than you really do. So hormones, they actually trump your willpower, and you're left victim to the endless snacking and cravings, while never really feeling satisfied. Have you ever finished a whole bag of pretzels or chips and never felt full? Also, that was a super simplified way to explain how insulin works, but hopefully you get the point that you should keep blood sugar stable and just avoid foods that spike it, like refined sugars and processed foods.
Yeah, I think this is a great place to remind everyone about episodes number 6 and number 7, where we talk about the signs your body's giving you when you eat too much sugar and too many carbs.
Yes, those are great episodes. While the type of food can actually determine insulin response, the amount of food can actually determine the responses of ghrelin, which is our hunger hormone, and leptin, our satiety hormone. So many people try to eat less when eating healthy. And I really don't want you to take this eat less message too far, because eating too much less than what you need long term, it can actually alter ghrelin and leptin, so two key metabolic hormones. And studies have shown that calorie restriction leads to higher levels of ghrelin, which is a hormone that stimulates hunger, and lower levels of leptin, which is a hormone that actually suppresses hunger and boosts fat burning. So eating less means that you're feeling hungrier and burning less fat. That doesn't sound good at all. And I really don't blame people for wanting to get off their diet the first day they start it. I honestly think the best diet is one where you eat real food and also where you eat enough of them so that your body can thrive.
Yeah, those diets that really deprive you are the worst ones of all. We've all tried them. Low-calorie diets, I think there's a lot of people still doing them. Low-fat diets, A lot of people still doing that. And then just boring, plain food diets with no flavor. And even ones like that have real food, like say you're eating like oatmeal and chicken breast and salad, they're missing out on so many nutrients because they're forgetting about this basic foundation of the human diet, nutrient density. You know, there are so many other factors to blame for the nutrient poor diet that we have today besides just blaming it on processed foods and fast foods. I mean, get a load of some of these reasons. You'll start to really understand why this is a big deal. I mean, modern foods like that grow out of grasses, cereal grains like wheat, rice, corn, and even sugar, they have around 1,300 to 1,500 calories per pound and hardly any nutrients per calorie, especially absorbable nutrients per calorie worth counting. But ancient plant foods like purple heirloom potatoes, yams, taro roots, fruits, and vegetables, those average around 200 calories per pound and are nutrient dense. 200 calories per pound versus 1,500 calories per pound. That's a huge, huge difference. That's why your body's craving so much more of that junk, because it's really looking for those nutrients. Now, also, our ancient ancestors ate the most nutrient-dense parts of the animal, like the liver, bone marrow, everything from nose to tail. But today, we're a bunch of wussies, you guys. We want our chicken breasts skinless and boneless, and we want perfectly filleted, skinless fish. And both of those we're typically eating deep fried, right? Now, consider more things than food, like our water treatment. Minerals are lost in the treatment of drinking water today, whereas in the ancient times, like Paleolithic time periods, water was our largest source of calcium and magnesium in the human diet. And what about the farming methods that Jessica introduced in the beginning of this whole episode? Today, farmers are repeatedly planting a single crop, like wheat, for instance, on the same plot of land in rows and rows and rows for years and years to come. And they're forever depriving the soil of diversity, the nutrients it needs to retain diverse and dense vitamin and mineral content. And they've come up with new varieties of wheat, for instance, that double the yield, but it also depletes the soil of the minerals even faster and even further. And this is precisely going against nature, like you said.
You know, the more nutrient poor these grains are and the soil is, the more nutrient poor the animal meat and eggs and dairy is too. A UK study found that dairy products lost 90% of copper levels today, while meat lost 55% and vegetables lost 76%.
Man, those are huge numbers. And it's not only these details that we have to worry about, but it's also just simply that our diet has completely changed in all ways, even without the packaged foods. Ever since the agricultural revolution, grains like wheat, oats, corn, rice, barley have become the basis of our diet, staples, because they're cheap and they can feed the masses. They're addicting and they're readily available. But what are the consequences? These foods contain a high amount of anti-nutrients. One I'll mention now is called phytates or phytic acid. It disrupts proper nutrient intake. It literally blocks us from absorbing the nutrients in the grains, burdening our body, making us sick, especially in the quantities that we eat grains today. It's really imperative that we start eating a diet that's more similar to the diet of humans long before mass production ever began. Mass food production, mass farming. I mean, did you know that many traditional hunter-gatherer societies ate as much as 100 different species of plants every year? The average American today eats between 8 and 10 different plants a year. Yeah, that's right. We go to our favorites and we rotate between about 8 to 10 different plants. And the secret to gaining the full benefits of fruits and vegetables in our diet is what we can learn from traditional people. Diversity. You need different colors like red and green and blue and purple, even white. You need fermented vegetables, raw ones, cooked ones, pickled ones. And we're not just talking about plants here. We need a variety of animal food sources, like shellfish, including oysters and mussels, grass-fed beef and grass-fed butter, fish eggs, pasture-raised chicken eggs with the yolks where all the nutrients are. These foods provide vitamins and minerals that we can't get from other food sources. Our health really depends on this variety. And that gets me thinking, what does this mean for a listener today? Well, you got to get back to the kitchen. There aren't a lot of shortcuts here. You have to care about whole foods and spend the time and the money, gradually get there. Work your way up to this new standard. Spend the time and money it takes to bring this whole food, real food lifestyle into your home and into your daily life.
Yeah, I mean, this is honestly probably one of my favorite episodes. I know for you too. I just think both Marisa and I are so passionate about it, just teaching our clients and our listeners to just eat real nutrient-dense foods and just to stay away from all that processed junk. I mean, you will start to feel so much better and so much more energized and vibrant. You will not want to turn back. So stay tuned, listeners, because next week it's going to be part 2 where we'll tell you which foods are actually the most nutrient-dense and what should your diet look like and where should you spend your food dollars and just get the most nutrient bang for your buck?
Yeah, I like to call that superfoods worth the splurge. I can't wait. This reminds me, I want you all thinking, I'm sure we have some listeners that have done the Whole30 diet before. If you did the Whole30 diet with real dedication and you made it through those 30 days, you don't forget that. You don't forget all that you learned from it. You might forget some of the things about the way you felt physically or some of the patterns that you have in your life, but you don't really forget the rules that are in place and looking at the back of a packaged food and seeing all the ingredients in there. You don't really forget it because it's so fundamental and makes so much sense when you experience it. When you go through something like that, like a big wake-up call, when you start to see like how junky our food really is every which way we turn and how much of it we eat every single day, it's just something you can't forget and your life can forever change. It's not about being strict. It's really just about finding, the perfect match for your body and for your lifestyle. You got to figure out what works for you, but if you don't start with real food, there's honestly no hope. I just love this topic. I can't wait for next week because I know you guys actually want tangible takeaways and you want the actual food lists, and we're going to give that to you. So thank you so much. We encourage you to share our podcast with somebody in your life. Help us get the word out and support each other in this hectic modern world.
Yes, pass it on, and also leave us a review on iTunes. You could start a conversation with us on Facebook or Instagram at The Foundation of Wellness Podcast. Talk to you guys next week.
Bye.